So Christine, thanks for joining us today.
Great, thanks for having me.
So for some of our viewers that might not be as familiar with it, right, can you tell us a little bit about what the blockchain is and how it works?
Blockchain is a digital ledger that multiple participants can share and interact with, both reading and writing together and having real-time updates. All the interactions are cryptographically secured and there's a built-in audit trail. You can think of it as a Google spreadsheet where multiple participants can have real-time updates on their interactions and have a golden source together, but without the central intermediary.
Okay, great. And we hear about public and private blockchains. Can you talk about the difference?
Sure. Public blockchains are blockchains that you can just use a computer, download some open source code, and join the network and interact in. And so there's an element of pseudonymity in that, as in you don't have to register or identify yourself, and then you can already start engaging in transactions or interactions with other entities on the network. For permission blockchains, it's a different construct where everyone has to properly identify themselves. There's enterprise-grade cybersecurity controls around how we think about interacting in this system together. And so permission blockchains is where JPMorgan and other enterprises have been focusing most of their attention on.
So public blockchains suited for things like anonymity. A lot of people think about that with cryptocurrency, other things like that.
That's right.
Private blockchains, much more enterprise-grade permission. You have to establish identity, other things like that. There's a sense of trust, right?
Right, and the goals are different. Public blockchain is mostly focused on peer-to-peer interactions in an alternative financial system, whereas the uses of blockchain technology and enterprise permission blockchain is about sharing processing infrastructure for cost savings, for streamlining operations, for enabling better coordination and synchronizations across multiple businesses and enterprises. In fact, Ernst & Young recently published something where they asserted that enterprise blockchain will do for networks of enterprises and businesses what ERP systems did for the single company, which I think is really interesting. Just think of it as like next generation enterprise technology.
Okay, so blockchain's still pretty new though, right? So talk about what's been going on in the last year. It seems to be exploding, right? A lot of different projects, et cetera. What's going on in the space?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, in the past few years, there's been a lot of hype around blockchain, and it was like almost like every other day that someone was announcing a project, a research thing that they were doing, or a proof of concept that they were working on with multiple of their counterparts. Basically, a Cambrian explosion of experimentation of like, what can we do with a blockchain? But I think that in the past year or so, all of that has slowed down a little bit, and for my part, what I'm seeing is that whilst the announcements have been slowing down, the underlying momentum around making this technology real has been increasing. There's been increasing investment in the space, both financial and technological, by large corporates with like the likes of Starbucks and USAA and BP across like multiple industries and for across multiple use cases. And you're seeing a lot of applications really become real. Actually, for my part, I've been excited because lately I've been hearing about people using blockchain, but there's no news announcements related to it. And so that just indicates to me that people aren't doing blockchain anymore to get news, to say that they're that they're doing innovation, but actually to say that they're actually using it for solving a problem.
But earlier this year, we announced JPM Coin, the first foray into payments with blockchain. Tell us a little bit about what JPM Coin is and how it works.
Sure. First of all, JPM Coin is not a cryptocurrency. I know that there's a lot of news in the space and a lot of myth associated with it. The easy way to think about JPMorgan Coin is that it is payments on a blockchain infrastructure. And actually, the origin story of JPMorgan Coin is that we just had to build it to enable payments for some of the other applications that we were building. So as an example, last year we were testing tokenized debt issuance and how we could create an end-to-end financial instrument on blockchain that had automated settlement, automated interest payments, et cetera. And what we found was that at that point, if you're talking about trying to trigger an interest payment with existing financial payments rails, it would look something like send a message to go send an instruction to send a wire to receive the wire, send a message back into the blockchain. So it was very hokey, and it was almost like, well, why bother using the blockchain? There's like no efficiency here.
Right.
Exactly. So from there, what we wanted to do was actually think about how we could create a digital representation of money that was sitting in a JPMorgan bank account on blockchain so that you could get the benefits of blockchain-based activities, so basically programmable value transfer, frictionless 24/7, 365 interactions with your network participants, but bridge it to the existing payments rails so that we're not using cryptocurrencies, we're using US dollars or euros or whatever currency that anyone's actually using. So that's been really exciting. We're thinking about it as enabling not only blockchain applications that we will build, but also the applications that our customers will build. So to the extent that they have something in supply chain finance or any other interaction that requires a payments rail, not everyone's a bank, so not everyone's best positioned to do this. We want to basically create this foundational payments rail that plugs into others' applications and allows people to solve the problems that they want to solve without having to build all of that infrastructure.
Got it, got it. So very focused on corporates, right? Focused on either corporate-to-corporate payments or even intra-company transfers or things like that.
That's right, that's right. We're exploring use cases around intra-company efficiencies and also cross-border corporate-to-corporate payments, and then obviously to enable all the other blockchain applications around settlements and interest payments for financial instruments, as an example. And this model of putting fiat in your JPMorgan or having fiat in your JPMorgan bank account immobilized and creating a digital representation of that, not only is that applicable for cash and payments, it's also applicable for other financial instruments. So actually JPMorgan filed a patent a couple years ago called the Virtual Depository Receipts Patent, and that contemplates tokenizing financial instruments or securities that might sit in your custody account, as an example. So really on-ramping things that live outside of blockchain onto blockchain so that we can take advantage of the benefits of this technology.
So a lot of use cases, a lot of energy in the financial industry. When you look outside the financial industry, companies like USAA and Starbucks and BP and other folks like that as well, what's going on more generally in the industry?
Sure. More generally in the industry, I think we're moving beyond just like the basic components of financial instruments on blockchain and payments on blockchains, as I mentioned, and kind of moving into a next generation of use cases that hopefully are uniquely enabled by blockchain. As an example, JPMorgan has been spending an enormous amount of time thinking about how we can use blockchain to build digital identities that are self-sovereign and self-managed. What that means is that people and entities will have more control over their data, will have more transparency around who has access to what attributes of their data, and maybe in a future world, like actually have an active participation in commercializing their data. This is in contrast to existing models where there's a creation of a honeypot of data where mostly you're the product and another company has access, and also that it's subject or vulnerable to hacks. And so we're thinking about blockchain to establish that new construct. But it requires behavior change, it requires a lot of change, but it's something that's quite interesting. Accenture, as an example, has been really leading in the space with this ID 2020 solution that they've been developing that's built off of blockchain. And most recently, they announced that they're working with the Canadian government and the Netherlands government to actually use this for cross-border travel, like their known travelers digital identity use case. So it's been quite exciting. Others like Microsoft and PayPal have also been in the space, in addition to MasterCard.
So that's interesting because obviously a lot of new privacy regulations, whether it be GDPR in Europe or more recently CCPA in California or things like that. And this sounds like that would have a huge, be a huge help in sort of helping people meet those requirements, right?
Yeah, and I think the most important thing to note is that when anyone says like we're doing digital identity with blockchain, that no private identity data at all is going to be on the blockchain. Like that is a really important thing to note. Basically what we can use the blockchain for is basically a registry for indicating whether or not like an actual data attribute is updated or has been revoked, but certainly we're not actually publishing real private data onto the blockchain.
Also a lot of discussion around blockchain and the Internet of Things, right? Another one that everybody wants to talk about these days, right? So what's going on there?
Yeah, so we've also been spending some time thinking about this and researching. I think the idea here is that there are more and more objects that are creating more and more digital data. And we're in line with the identity work that we're doing, harnessing that data, actually thinking about how to utilize it in a proper way, it has been important to us. And so, for our part, we've been thinking about like what are the use cases that can be uniquely enabled when you connect objects that actually create this data with blockchain. As an example, what are some use cases that you could enable if you could connect a metered solar panel to blockchain, right? Like there are many applications around actually registering renewable energy, generation, and then if you take that further downstream, like if you're an investor that's interested in sustainable investments, like how you might even be able to quantify your return on investment in terms of actual green energy generation. That's one example. Also spending some time thinking about what it might look like to connect moving objects like vehicles on blockchain. Like what would it look like if you have digital passports for vehicles or even parts of vehicles in the supply chain? And so there are many companies like Daimler and BMW and others that are doing research in this space.
Okay, so lots of interest in a lot of industries, right? How should companies think about getting started with blockchain?
Sure. The first thing companies should do is just make sure that they have gotten smart on the technology, have a baseline understanding of what it is, what it can do, and definitely what it can't do. I wouldn't expect that anyone should be able to understand the very deepest technical detail or understand everything that's been happening, and as we've mentioned, the space is moving quite quickly. But just getting a base level understanding would be important. The second thing to do is to research like what else is happening in your sector, in your industry. What are your industry peers or leaders doing? And as we've mentioned, like people haven't been shy about their blockchain projects. So certainly there's a lot out there that we can read that also points in the direction of what are the applicable use cases to you and your company in your particular industry. And then from there, what's really important is for you to narrow on what are the actual pain points you're experiencing that you want to focus on and prioritize, and take a step back from there and understand whether or not blockchain can be part of the tech stack that helps solve that. So problem and pain point first, then figure out if blockchain is applicable. This has been really important for us as we shape our use cases. As an example, Interbank Information Network, we scope that use case to be very narrowly focused on solving the actual problem of sanction screening exceptions across the correspondent bank value chain. And what we found is that by solving an actual problem that people have, that actually sweeps like adoption of the network, which is obviously critical because no one should be blockchaining by themselves. Like otherwise, just use a centralized database. And so we're actually seeing the fruits of that labor come through. We have over 250 correspondent banks signed up to join the network already after 1 year from launch. And so it's really important to understand the pain point, understand that doing a blockchain project takes financial investment and time investment, just as building any other technology. So you really have to have a clear eye on what is the return on investment when you're undertaking a project like this.
So just to recap, A, make sure you understand the technology, maybe not super deep, but broad enough to be able to know where it's applicable. Yep. Number two, make sure that you're solving the right problem, right? And number three, that problem is not just unique to you, but there's a broad level of interest in a community so you can build that network effect, right?
That's right.
Great. Christine, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.